All right, so today we're tackling something I think we've all wondered about at some point.
Okay.
That mysterious little rating lurking in our cell phone specs, SAR.
Yeah, that sounds kind of ominous when you say it like that.
Right, like something out of a sci-fi movie. But no, today we're demystifying it, breaking it down to understand what SAR really tells us about those radio waves our phones are sending and receiving.
It's one of those things you see it all the time, but don't really think twice about.
Exactly, it's just there in the background.
But once you start, peeling back the layers of SAR,
Yeah.
it actually gets pretty interesting.
For sure. So first things first, for anyone who maybe skipped that day in physics class, what exactly is SAR?
So SAR stands for specific absorption rate. And in the simplest terms, it's a way to measure how much of that radio frequency energy, we'll call it RF energy for short, how much of that energy your body absorbs when you're using your cell phone.
So like when I'm glued to my phone, scrolling through social media, endlessly scrolling, my body's absorbing dot something. Oh, okay. That does sound a little unsettling.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's understandable to feel that way. But here's the thing to keep in mind. RF energy, it's not the same type of radiation that we hear about with X-rays, for example.
Okay.
Totally different part of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Right.
And honestly, our bodies are exposed to it constantly from all sorts of sources, not just our phones.
That's a good point. I mean, we are surrounded by signals and waves and all sorts of things all the time. Okay, so then how do we even go about measuring the SAR thing? Are we strapping phones to people in a lab somewhere?
Not quite.
Okay.
Although I'll admit the actual process is a bit more high-tech than I think most people would picture.
Oh, really?
We're talking sophisticated models, think like simulated human heads and bodies
Oh, wow.
filled with these liquids that are designed to mimic how our actual tissues absorb RF energy.
So like crash test dummies, but for cell phones.
Precisely. And during testing, the phone is placed in all these different positions against these models, next to the ear, how you'd hold it for texting, even that awkward cheek-to-shoulder hold we've all been guilty of.
Right. Got to be hands-free sometimes.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're really trying to simulate how we actually use our phones in the real world.
Yeah, they're trying to make it as realistic as possible.
I'm guessing they crank the phone up to full power too, just to see the maximum.
You got it. Full power across all the frequencies it uses.
Wow.
And get this, they use this robotic probe that measures the electric field at literally hundreds of different points within that model
Oh, wow.
to find the absolute highest SAR value.
So it's like the peak, the absolute highest reading.
Exactly. And that's the number that gets reported, even if in most other positions, the phone had much lower readings.
Wow, so one little spike in the data becomes the official number. That is really interesting.
And it gives you a sense of the upper limit,
Right, the maximum.
but it doesn't tell the whole story.
And I'm guessing that's where some of the limitations of SAR come in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because real life is a lot messier than a controlled lab setting.
Yeah, it really feels like there's a big but coming here, right? Like knowing the SAR of my phone, that's good and all, but it can't be the whole picture.
You're totally on the right track. It's like, imagine SAR testing, as sophisticated as it is, it can't perfectly capture the nuances of how you specifically use your phone every single day.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
It's like saying a car gets 30 miles per gallon.
Okay.
But that doesn't consider like city driving versus highway or how aggressively someone slams on the gas,
A perfect analogy. Because SAR testing, it doesn't factor in all those real-world variables.
Okay.
Like, for example, think about network signal strength.
Oh, right.
You ever notice how your phone seems to heat up more when you're in an area with, like, spotty service? Oh, totally. Especially when I'm, like, desperately trying to refresh my Maps app, and it's just spinning and spinning and spinning.
That right there, that's your phone working overtime to try to latch onto a signal. And in doing so, it's likely emitting more RF energy in the process.
Oh, wow. So the SAR rating, it's under these, like, very controlled, ideal conditions.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, like, what does this all mean for the average person just, going about their day? Should we even be looking at SAR values when we're, like, comparing phones to buy?
It's not about ignoring SAR altogether.
Okay.
But it is about understanding its limitations.
Yep.
It's one data point among many, and focusing solely on getting the absolute lowest SAR might not actually translate to the lowest RF exposure in your actual daily life.
So if just chasing the lowest number on the spec sheet isn't the answer, what are some, like, practical things that we can do to, I don't know, to be a little bit more mindful, I guess, about RF exposure?
Well, this is where I think those smartphone habits come in.
Okay.
And the great news is most of these are really simple tweaks to how you probably already use your phone.
Okay.
So
Fair.
first and foremost, remember, distance is your friend.
So maybe not holding the phone directly against my ear for every single call?
Maybe. Unless you have one of those.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Taking calls on speakerphone, using headphones, using a headset. Those are your allies when it comes to managing exposure.
And probably a good excuse to invest in some really nice headphones, right?
There you go. Got to justify it somehow. But no, seriously, even a little distance can truly make a difference.
Okay, that makes sense. What about, like, this might seem obvious, but just being mindful of your phone's signal strength?
Yes, absolutely.
Like, if I'm at home and I know there's, like, a weak signal spot in, like, the back corner of my house, maybe save those, like, hour-long phone calls for when I'm, near a window or have full bars.
Exactly. You're getting it. Think about where your phone's working the hardest and maybe try to avoid those situations if you can.
That's really interesting. Okay, so we're talking about habits, things like that. What about those, those radiation blocking phone cases and stickers that you see advertised that claim to, like, reduce your exposure? Do those actually do anything?
Oh, yeah, I've seen those too. And I totally get why people are drawn to them, right? Everyone's looking for that, like, extra layer of protection.
Right, for sure.
But unfortunately, the truth is, most of those products haven't been scientifically proven to significantly reduce RF exposure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and in fact, if anything, interfering with your phone's antenna could actually force it to work harder and therefore emit more energy to try to compensate.
Wow, so it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It might make you feel better, but it's not actually solving the problem. So much of this comes down to just being mindful of our habits and not necessarily trying to find a magic solution.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like anything else. We don't avoid driving just because cars can be dangerous.
Right.
We learn the rules of the road, we buckle our seatbelts, and we make conscious choices to try to minimize risk. It's the same idea here with RF exposure,
I love that analogy. It's about, like, being informed and taking those little steps without, like, letting fear take over.
Exactly.
So if we zoom out a bit here, what's the biggest takeaway you hope people walk away with today from this deep dive? What does it all mean?
To me, I think the key takeaway is that SAR, it's not about like ranking phones on this scale of safe to dangerous.
Okay.
It's just one piece of a much larger, more complex puzzle when it comes to like truly understanding our relationship with the technology that we're using every single day.
And that technology is not going away anytime soon.
Exactly. In fact, it's only going to get more advanced.
For sure. Yeah.
And as new devices emerge and networks evolve, the way we measure and understand RF exposure, it'll probably have to evolve too.
Right.
We're in a constant cycle of like learning and adapting, which I think is, honestly, it's kind of fascinating.
It really is. It makes you think, like, we've been focusing so much on cell phones, but what about, like, all the other devices in our lives that are also emitting RF energy, right?
Oh, sure.
Like our laptops, our Wi-Fi routers, Bluetooth headphones, like the list goes on and on.
It's this whole unseen world.
It really is.
It's easy to forget that, our environment is just full of these invisible waves constantly bouncing around us.
Right.
And honestly, there's still so much that we don't fully understand about long-term exposure to all of this.
Right.
But, by staying curious, by asking questions and approaching these topics with a healthy dose of skepticism,
Yeah.
I think we can start to make more informed decisions about how we're interacting with this technology.
Well said. Well said. It's all about finding that balance, right? Like embracing the good, being mindful of the unknowns, but also not letting the unknowns turn into these like unnecessary fears.
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowledge is power. And the more we understand about the technology we interact with every single day, the better equipped we are to use it safely and responsibly.
Couldn't agree more. Well, there you have it. Hopefully you're feeling a bit more enlightened about that little thing called SAR and what it means and what it doesn't mean for your daily life.